Welcome to my June wrap-up where I'll be discussing everything I read in June. I actually think I have all of the books here as well for once. Some really good books in here. Yeah. I started this month with The Temporary by Rachel Cusk. Now, I did a reading catch-up vlog and I spoke about this book quite a lot in there. So I'll just briefly give you my thoughts on it. I enjoyed it. It's not one of my favorite Cusks that I've read. I think I went in with my expectations really high, having read Second Place last year and then Outline in May, I think it was. So my expectations were like through the roof. But it was still really good, just not quite hitting what I had experienced before from Cusk. We have two different protagonists. We have Francine and we have Ralph. They are truly unlikable. They're in corporate London and they are not well matched, and basically that is what this book is about. As I said, I go more in depth in another vlog that I did, so if you want to hear more Cusk thoughts, go watch that video. I'll link it downstairs. But what I did love about this book was you could still see her kind of masterful use of language, her amazing word choice. I feel like that is what I love most about Cusk. Like, she will just weave in the best words. Sometimes I'll have to pause and like look up what a word means and I'll be like, oh my god, yes, this was the perfect word. I've learned a new word. My vocabulary is growing. Thank you, Rachel Cusk. Doing a service to us all. Then I read Averno by Louise Glück, which was a stunning poetry collection. I really loved this. I would say that this kind of explores a lot of nature and the human condition and how us as humans and nature can experience the same thing. There's stunning imagery. It has a mythical feel to it because it is based on the story of Persephone, who was, you know, stolen from her mother and taken to the underworld by Hades. So it has a lot of light and dark, and like the language is just stunning. And I felt like I really needed to find a good collection of poetry to kind of get me back into it. It had been a while since I'd read any, and this was definitely the right collection for me. I was just absolutely swept up in all of the kind of mythical imagery. I feel like there's a lot to do with like romantic love, but also love of nature and how human emotion can be echoed in nature. And yeah, there's just all of it. It was a really good collection overall, but there was definitely some standouts for me as well. The Evening Star being one of them. You know, I feel like if you want to get into poetry, this is a good place to start because it felt really accessible. It was just some beautiful language with some beautiful imagery, a mythological feel, and a lot of tying human nature and, you know, the wild and emotions together. I feel like this collection did a lot to illustrate the dichotomy of the ever-changing energy of nature and of humans, but also kind of how everything is the same in that way. Like, it's ever-changing, like it will always change, and that is the one constant. And the kind of shadowy side of things and how there can be real beauty in that, but it's also heartbreaking. Yeah, it's really hard to sum up how I feel about this poetry collection, apart from just saying it was beautiful and heartbreaking and mythological and mysterious, and yeah, I loved it. There were no other stars, only the one whose name I knew. As in my other life I did her injury, Venus, star of the early evening. To you I dedicate my vision, since on this blank surface you have cast enough light to make my thought visible again. The terrible moment was the spring after his work was erased, when he understood that the earth didn't know how to mourn, that it would change instead, and then go on existing without him. It is so beautiful. Like, I just love it so much. Then I read what might be my favorite book of the month, maybe, is it my favorite book of the year so far? Paradise Rocks. Like, I knew going into this that I was really, really going to like it, just from reading the blurb and the fact that Rebecca Eats Books had, you know, loved it. It was everything I hoped it would be and more. So reading this book not only gives you a beautiful visual experience, I mean, we love the cover, it's stunning. It was like a whole experience in itself. It was really visceral. Everything was coming off the page. I could smell everything, I could taste everything, I could really hear everything, really feel everything, and it was quite claustrophobic and damp and dingy, and like everything smelled a little funky. This is an experience of a book, and I feel like if you have a bit of a weak stomach, then maybe it's not for you. The amount of urine that is mentioned in this book is sky high. There is a lot of peeing that goes on, a lot of listening to pee, a lot of looking at the color of pee. There's just a lot of pee, and a lot of moldy apples. This book was a coming of age book unlike any other I've read. So our protagonist, she has come from Norway to, where has she come to? I think it's like a made up town for university, but I think it's meant to be maybe in the UK, Averno. So she's come to Averno to go to university, and I don't think that's a real place. Like, I looked it up and nothing appeared, so I'm gonna assume it's a made up place. And she has quite a bit of a culture shock, not least to do with the way that people eat food and the type of food that they eat. She finds herself a little bit isolated, and she then ends up moving into, in my head, it was just the coldest, draftiest, funkiest smelling warehouse ever, and it had kind of been divided up into rooms, and it had mezzanines, and yeah, there wasn't much privacy. Like, you could hear and see everything that was going on. It kind of coincided with what she studies. So she's a biologist, and so she's looking at the way things live. The setting that she was living in kind of gave her and her roommate a view of how the other person lives, like how are they as a person. And with the space being so open and with privacy being so limited, her and her flatmate begin to merge together, and oh my god, just read this book. I think this might end up being my favorite book of the year. I loved it so much. I think I read it in like one afternoon, just devoured it, absolutely loved it. Followed up that incredible novel with some nonfiction by Eileen Myles. So I hadn't read any of their work before. This is my favorite genre, writers writing about writing, yet again. The way that Myles writes is so candid, so honest, and so reflective, really unapologetic. They kind of get into the nitty-gritty of practical life and writing and living as a writer, and yeah, it was just really easy to read, and I felt like I was learning about their life as well as their practice, and as well as who they are as a person, and why they write the way that they write because of who they are. Yeah, it was just a really down-to-earth and honest read, and I would recommend, again, if you like to read about artists' practice, or if you're interested in reading about the life of a writer, then For Now would be a really good book for you. I followed that up with more nonfiction, Self-Portrait in Green by Ndiaye, and it could not be more different. So Eileen Myles, down to earth, very candid, honest, what you see is what you get, very to the point writing. Self-Portrait in Green could not be more mysterious and lyrical, and it almost doesn't read like a memoir at all. Like, I had to keep reminding myself that it was. It had such a feel of magical realism. Our protagonist keeps encountering the same type of woman, who is a woman in green. Now, I couldn't exactly tell you what that kind of woman is or what makes her a woman in green. The idea seems really particular, but it's also like really elusive. Like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but yeah, the energy that this book had was just mystical and beguiling, and like I said, I had to keep reminding myself that this was a memoir. It just felt so almost otherworldly sometimes, and the writing was really beautiful. I think if you're someone who likes kind of lyrical, beautiful writing, a touch of the mystical, then this would be a good book for you. I'm actually planning on doing a video where I will talk about this one more. But yeah, I couldn't tell you what A Woman in Green is, but I feel like if I saw A Woman in Green, then I would know she's a woman in green, I think. Then we had The White Book by Kang, which my boyfriend bought me as a gift, and yeah, he nailed it. I love this. It's a poetry collection that is memoir as well. Kang is an incredible writer. She has explored really intimate and really heartbreaking details of her life with such clarity and softness and beauty that, like, I know I will come back to this again and again and again. The use of the color white was just so interesting because white is usually associated, it has connotations of things that are pure and simple and good, but Kang is using this color to explore and dive into things that are really difficult and quite murky and, you know, carry a lot of weight. So I thought her choice of using white was really effective. And like I said about Self-Portrait in Green, I will make a video where I talk about this more. I'm wanting to do a color series because I think it's very interesting that writers would choose a color to explore a theme. I love that concept. So I will look at that more and speak about it more. But yeah, they're very short pieces of poetry, little episodes that look at the loss that her mother endured before she was born and how that has affected her life, knowing that she came after a loss. And she uses this theme of white to look through these really difficult things. So she uses snow, she uses rice to look at something that's really difficult and has really affected her and her family's life. So nice. For there are moments lying in the darkened room when the chill in the air is a palpable presence, turned towards indecipherable sounds laden with love and anguish, towards a pale blur in body heat. Perhaps I too have opened my eyes in the darkness as she did and gazed out. It's so nice. One day she took a handful of coarse salt and examined it closely. Those crystals had a cool beauty, their white touched with grey. For the first time she had a real sense of the power that lay within this material, the power to preserve, the power to sterilize and to heal. The imagery is so stunning and just so simple as well. She's looking at rice, milk, salt, the moon, snow, everyday things, and she uses them to really dive deep, and she brings out so much gorgeous imagery with it. Yeah. If you've read The Vegetarian by Kang, which I've read years ago and loved, you'll understand how powerful the imagery can be when Kang writes. I remember feeling physically unwell reading The Vegetarian, but absolutely loving how powerful the writing was. And in The White Book, the writing is just, if not more powerful, but it didn't give me that uneasy, unwell feeling. It was just really heart-touching, very comforting, yet upsetting. It was just really emotional overall. Again, if you're looking to get into poetry, this would be a good place to start. Probably even more accessible than Averno is. Averno definitely has that otherworldly kind of feel, whereas The White Book looks at, you know, everyday objects and everyday situations to explore, you know, a family trauma, and it's gorgeous. And then the last book of June was a solid read. I absolutely love this book. I thought I would love it because my beautiful friend Ben Green recommended it to me and said that it blew their mind. Signs Preceding the End of the World by Yuri Herrera was unlike any book I have ever read. The premise is so simple, And it's a very short book, but it contained so much to do with immigration, borders, language, relationships, womanhood, racism. It was masterfully written. I love this. So like I said, the premise seems really straightforward. We have a young woman who wants to cross the border because she has a message to relay to her brother, and it's set between Mexico and the States, and her mother is sending her on her way, telling her, like, go share this message with your brother, go find him, bring him home. And what then ensues is such stylistic language like I've never read. It dropped you right in it. So from the beginning, from the get-go, you're clearly in Herrera's world, and I kind of love that. This is in translation, so this has been translated by Lisa Dillman, and at the end there's a translator's note, and I loved reading that. I love an editor's note or a translator's note, and this translator's note is definitely one of the best that I've ever read. My intention here is to leave a linguistic reminder to the reader that this, in fact, is a translated text. There were words that weren't directly translated to English, and it reminded you, like, this is not a native English book. Like, this has been translated for us. It is from somewhere else. It is from another place, another tongue, another pen, and I kind of love that that was left in. And then even, like, there's a word that's used a lot, verse. If someone was to verse, they're leaving. If you verse, you go. And I thought it was such a clever word because you immediately know what it means, but then she explains in the translator note why she's chosen that word. A noun turned verb, a term clearly referring to poetry and part of several verbs involving motion and communication, traverse, reverse, converse, as well as the end of the universe. The protagonist is a character who most often verses, as well as the woman who serves as a bridge between cultures, languages, and worlds. Absolutely solid book. Oh, I love this book. Then she made out two mountains colliding in the back of beyond, like they'd come from who knows where and were headed to anyone's guess, but had come together at that intense point in the nothingness and insisted on crashing noisily against each other, though the oblivious might think that they simply stood there in the silence. Like, she literally just, like, seeing some hills, and then we get that. Like, oh my god, it brings everything to life. Like, the landscape is its own character. I think that's a really strong part in this because the setting is so important. There's a lot of writing about it that just brings life to setting. There's so much clever language. Like, that is what I'm here for. It hadn't fully dawned yet. The sky was barely a reddish exhalation that hadn't quite made up its mind to spread over the earth. See, everything is like personified. The earth and nature is its own character because setting is so important. And thank you for recommending this to me, Ben, because you were right. I absolutely loved it. So that's everything I read in June. I would say that was a really good reading month. Like, a lot of really good books in there. Books I'm so happy to have read. Yeah. How was your June for reading? Was there anything from that month that was your favorite? I would love to know, as usual. I'm trying to think. I feel like I want to give you some recommendations that aren't book-based, but like things from last month that I really enjoyed, but I'm coming up blank. Yeah, I couldn't tell you. So a couple of things that I watched in June that I really loved. Two series. One of them was Severance, which I think everybody's watching at the moment for good reason. It's a slow burn. You don't really know what's going on. You're just kind of having to wrap your mind around a very different kind of world. It's quite dystopian, and then all of a sudden it absolutely ramps up the drama and you are hooked. The premise is that there is a company that has some employees who are severed, and that means that their work life and their home life are completely different. The work life personality has no memories of the home life personalities and vice versa. And yeah, just the question of, is it ethical to do that? Does the work person become their own person because they don't know who they are on the outside, and that is the person that has kind of like sent that personality there? And yeah, it is really, really, really good. And also I watched the adaptation of Scenes from a Marriage that had Jessica Chastain and Oscar Isaac, and wow, gorgeous cinematography, beautiful music, and just really good acting. I cried a lot. It was, yeah, just stunning. If you want to see some beautiful people fall apart, then that would be a good watch for you. Oh, and then at the end of the month, my sister and I went to Edinburgh and we saw Fran Lebowitz giving a talk, and oh my god, it was incredible. So I'd watched Pretend It's a City on Netflix and loved it. I really love Fran's writing. I think she's hilarious and just so dry, and I love her energy. So my sister Beth and I went to go see her live, and the setup of what they did was brilliant. So she was interviewed for about 45 minutes, and this was the day after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and so a lot of the conversation was to do with that. Having someone from America, where the laws are so different, was just such an interesting talking point for the interviewer, being Scottish. And so they spoke about abortion and guns for quite a while, and then they got into Fran as a writer, Fran's upbringing, why New York, and she was hilarious. So funny, and so to the point, not daring to please anyone, just completely being herself. And then after the 45 minutes of interview, the interviewer left the stage and Fran took to the lectern, and she just took audience questions, and it was magnificent. If she is doing any dates, because she's on tour right now, if she's doing any dates near you, then try get a ticket, because that woman is so, she is so clever, she's so switched on, and she is so funny. Yeah, that's my recommendations for you, books wise and otherwise. Thank you so much for watching. Tell me how your June was. I would love to know if you read anything that blew your mind, if you read anything that you know is now a forever favorite, or you just read something that was quite interesting and you want to share it, then please let me know. Yeah, I love you. Bye.